Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Herold here on Badlands Media. I'm your host, Jon Herold, and I hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday. It's no longer Monday. That's a win. Plenty to discuss today. I have quite a few tabs open, actually. And one story I really want to focus on is Tulsi Gabbard's letter from yesterday. I want to dig into the weeds with that a little bit. But how's the chat going? John, how did you come up with the name Badlands? When Badlands first started, there was a huge, like all the people that were there at the beginning, we were like going back and forth, sharing name ideas, and I kept coming back to the Badlands one. It was, and obviously Badlands of North Dakota, just felt right. There's another one. I really like the idea of Ardent Media too. And we also had Rubicon Media. That was like a finalist, but went with Badlands, and it's fitting. North Dakota is Democrat majority. No. I mean, doesn't matter. It's all uniparty. Taco Tuesday. Hell yeah, Bay Theater Dave. What else did I see? Maybe that's it. 90% of the people on X started Badlands with Patel Patriot. Some of you guys aren't making any sense, but anyway, guys, let's get a quick word from our sponsors of today's show, and we'll get right into that Tulsi Gabbard letter. I'm loving the election stuff coming back into focus. Been going through some older threads of mine talking about election things, and it's just very, I don't know, heartwarming. How many heartwarming things these days in the news cycle. The government voted. It looks like they're going to unshut down the government, so that's annoying. But we'll talk about that if we get there. So first up, we got some My Shroom Vibe.
Hey there, Earthlings. I'm here on the streets of New York to tell you about something that's literally out of this world. You know, traveling between dimensions really takes it out of you. But I've found the perfect solution. My Shroom Vibe can now be your Shroom Vibe. Elevate your frequency. Get microdose capsules, gummies, and chocolate bars at myshroomvibe.com. Use code BADLANDS for 10% off your order. Trust me. Galaxy hopping demands balance, and ours comes from Mother Nature. Organic, not synthetic. It's the real deal. Cy Lee, if you know what I mean. Check it out. Your frequency will thank you. Visit myshroomvibe.com. Organic goodness, not synthetic. Use code BADLANDS.
Michigan White 1963 says, we all know if elections are not fixed, there is no going forward. It is one of the funnier things seeing people report on what Tulsi's doing and some of these other things going on with election-related news, the Fulton County stuff. There are people who are simultaneously like, oh my gosh, our election 2020 was stolen. But then they're like, but also the midterms. Very stupid. R.T. Jones says Trump will get his consecutive terms. I think so too. I really do. I think he's going to run again. We got some hurdles to clear mentally, not, I don't think constitutionally or anything, but we'll get there. We also have Rise Attire on the docket today for a sponsor. Let's get their ad in, guys. Get your Sovereign Alliance gear.
What is the Sovereign Alliance? The Sovereign Alliance are a collection of leaders and countries that are aligned not in the vision for their countries, but against a vision that has been thrust upon them. I believe that the Sovereign Alliance is less a battle for something and more a battle against something. They are against globalism, collectivism. They are against the rules-based international order.
Sovereign Alliance, the latest addition to Badlands Rise merch, available now at badlandsmedia.tv/rise.
Frederick Leathers has another pretty good question here. This is one I see quite a bit. If all elections are fixed, or I think he meant fake, how did Trump get elected? A curious question. And this is something we've talked about for a long time. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I'll give my opinion on this. I think there's always been election fraud, but I think 2016, they didn't commit enough fraud to get over the hurdle. Like, they didn't think Trump had a chance. I think they honestly like messed up, the left. They didn't campaign in a few places. They didn't understand how much support Trump's message really had. And so as soon as Trump got in there, it was like, oh crap, we better fix this and not let it happen again. And they created the election fraud infrastructure like we've never seen, like with the mail-in ballots, the machine stuff, like you name it. It was death by 1,000 cuts from that point forward. The fraud has always existed. I don't think they had it implemented at scale or everywhere at the time in 2016. Now, the 2020 election, stolen, fraudulent, I believe Trump implemented evolution. Then go to 2024, I still think our elections are fake. I think they let him get in there. I don't think they could narratively get away with stealing another election from Trump. I think that would have been a tipping point, a turning point of sorts. I don't think they could allow it. So like, well, the lesser of two evils is we let him get in there and do our best to stall and stonewall, maybe shut down the government here or there, do the best we can, and see if we can just outlast him versus sacrificing their election fraud apparatus and losing it anywhere, but especially here. I think they would lose it everywhere, all across the world. So a calculated risk, maybe, I don't know. But Trump's legitimacy, in my opinion, doesn't come from the 2024 election. It comes from the 2016 election, and then it comes from the mandate of the people. He's got the support of the people, the consensus of the people behind him. And that's how you derive legitimacy anyway. It's not like an election isn't what gives somebody legitimacy. It's whether or not they have the support of the people. And Trump clearly has that. That's just my opinion on it, though. They didn't understand how angry folks were in 2016. Hubris is the power. Yeah, I agree with that stuff, Asia. Too big to rig was his way of cheating. I don't know if I agree with that phrasing. I'm watching you on Apple Vision Pro. This thing is ridiculously cool. Is that like the glasses thing? How far back do we cascade fake elections and who had been voted for? I'm asking what's the starting point. You know, I don't know. I don't know how far back we go. And if I'm being honest, like we keep talking about, we want to push things all the way back to, 1870, prior to that even, when they warped the Constitution back then. I don't know if we're going to get there. I think it's going to be a hard enough time just getting the normie mind to accept what happened in 2020, what actually happened. And people are freaking out right now about Tulsi. Like the mainstream media is melting down. I'll show you a couple clips. And speaking of like, how do you derive legitimacy? Look at Trump's rallies. Somebody in the chat made a great point. Look at how many people show up to his rallies. And then think of the access to information that people like Trump has and the military has. You can't, we can't even fathom probably the amount of data they're able to gather on us, especially as technology moves forward. They know everything. They know exactly where they're at. They know exactly, like when Trump talks about the polls and like gets super mad about a CNN poll or a Fox News poll or whatever, he knows that those things are meaningless. He's just playing with the normie battle space when he talks about it. Panic in DC. Let's watch a couple videos. Joe Scarborough was melting down this morning. Let me share my screen and show you this. And this all derives from Tulsi Gabbard and that letter, which we're going to go over here in a little bit, just to give you a preview. I don't know if you guys all saw this, but we talked about it a little bit on Baseless. It's been all over social media, so I'm sure by now everybody has. But Congress and the media has been freaking out. That Mark Warner guy, one of the guys on the Senate or House Intel Committee. I don't know which one. Yeah, House Representatives. So he had a huge Twitter post. He was doing interviews, and so she responded to them, being like, "This is what's going on." And let me show you what Scarborough said.
And so I'm not talking about all people that voted for Donald Trump. We see the polls. There are some people who actually understand the dangers. But here, David French, again, this is built upon this stupid lie. And it's not even a smart, this is a stupid lie that the 2020 elections were stolen. 63 federal judges threw out 63 of Donald Trump's stupid claims that the 2020 election was stolen, including the Supreme Court, including Thomas and Alito. All of them threw it out, said it was stupid. You had Donald Trump's own administration and the person in charge of elections saying it was the safest, it was the fairest, cleanest election in the history of our constitutional republic. So these aren't even good lies. These aren't even like doesn't even make us do any work. It's right in front of our faces. And now he's basically saying, you got Pam Bondi in Minnesota saying, yeah, we'll stop terrorizing your state if you turn over all your voting files. That's in Minnesota. And now in Georgia, Tulsi Gabbard is now in charge of seizing voters' files in Georgia. That is so unconstitutional.
Man, I'll just play it out. Never mind.
States run elections, not presidents who are scared their party's going to lose. And it's not an overstatement at all to say that this looks like what autocratic regimes do. This looks like what Orban does. This looks like what Putin does. This looks like what all the worst of the worst across the world do. And right now, it's happening again in Georgia.
It's funny seeing these people freak out. The court cases thing, they always go back to that one. Like there were 63 election court cases and not a single one of them got through. Well, how many of those court cases actually saw evidence? Not a single one of them actually got to the evidence. It was all procedural stuff or timing stuff. Like there wasn't enough time to actually get into it. A lot of the cases after January 6th, Trump just, okay, we're done. Just dismissed it. Again, not because he didn't have the evidence or wasn't willing to show the evidence. He decided to do something else. That's where I think devolution comes into play. But this freak out is fascinating to me. They are melting down. And when it comes to, we always talk about that excuse, once the normies see the evidence, once they understand how fraudulent our elections are, they'll wake up and realize all sorts of stuff. I don't even know how they finish that excuse, but I'm not sold that's ever going to happen. Like, do you guys really think Joe Scarborough or any of these mainstream media people are going to report on the details or specifics of election fraud reveals? He kind of already told you what they're going to do. Any prosecutions, any evidence that comes out, they're going to say like, yeah, this is just Trump being a Hitler, going after political opponents. This is what happens in, I think he said, autocratic regimes. That's how they're going to frame it. They're going to say it's all conspiracy theories. Fulton County is prepping a lawsuit. They may have already filed it, where they're concerned about the chain of custody of the ballots in FBI possession, which is hysterical considering they don't even care about the chain of custody of ballots in their own possession when they're counting elections and auditing elections. But yeah, they're melting down. But it's going to be interesting to watch play out how we get from where we are now with the mainstream media and how they're talking about it. And then once the actual, evidence or prosecutions or whatever it is that comes out, whatever it is, I don't know how deep it's going to go. I think it's going to be pretty deep though, pretty pervasive. I hope. I hope they show it all. I hope we get it all. And then we get some sort of solution on the flip side of it. But whenever that comes out, I do not expect the mainstream media to change their tune. They're too far gone. Like, why would they? Especially if they're complicit, which I would not be surprised. We've always talked about these people being criminally punished for the propaganda they push. Maybe that's a pipe dream. Maybe not. But especially if there's no actual accountability, why would they ever change their tune? They're just going to keep doubling down. There's no incentive for them to do so. They're not motivated by the truth. So what's going to get them to switch? You know what I mean? Does that all make sense? I do have another clip here. I think this is the one. It's pretty good.
Do you think that Trump is right that he, in fact, won Fulton County and won the state of Georgia?
I don't think so, but what's the harm in seeing?
So
what's the harm?
what's the harm? So you think that
what is the harm in seeing?
Well, Trump has made up out of whole cloth an accusation.
Why is this judicial warrant wrong in your opinion?
Joe,
why is the judicial?
I just asked you a simple question. Do you think he won the state?
I said I don't think so.
Okay, so then what is he looking for? I mean, other than what he's already told us that he wants, which is more votes.
The U.S. attorney went to a judge that was not appointed by Donald Trump and gave evidence and got a warrant from a judge. That really happened. You can pretend that didn't happen, but that didn't happen.
Do you think this has anything to do at all with Trump's false claims that he won that state?
Wait a minute.
Hold on, let him answer.
How do you know definitively
I'm asking you a question.
You're saying this from
Joe?
You're saying this from a high horse.
I'm just asking
how do you know there's no evidence without
investigation?
This is how I know, Joe, because this has been litigated and relitigated. There were 60 different cases in 2020. Trump lost all of them. And now you're coming back 6 years later, and you want to say, let's look at the 2020 election. I think this is ridiculous. And if Trump wants to, and let me just say this:
is the judge corrupt?
But I read that 5-page warrant today, and that warrant relies on an FBI agent who testified that there was evidence of the criminal activity that took place in those files. There's no evidence to prove that. That FBI agent is a liar. Just like Donald Trump is.
That FBI agent is a liar. They're scared. They're scared. And what's the harm in it? Either way, like if they're right, and this is kind of the point we've always gone back to, if they're right about there not being any fraud, what do they have to worry about? Why does it matter? But no, they're freaking out. They don't want anybody to actually look at this because this is all they have. I mean, they still have control in other places. I'm not a believer in the full control stuff. We've talked about that, but this is the most important thing they still have is our election fraud system. And they're freaking out. And this is what Tulsi Gabbard said. Let's start going through this a little bit. So she posted this: contrary to the blatantly false and slanderous accusations being made against me by members of Congress and their friends in the propaganda media, the Office of the DNI has and will continue to take action under my statutory authorities to secure our nation and ensure the integrity of our elections. And we did go through this on basis last night. We read the whole thing. I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to probably stop more, especially when we get to the authorities section, because there's some interesting stuff in there. So timing wise, Tulsi last week, I think it was Thursday, Friday, she's pictured at Fulton County during the FBI raid where they're getting the ballots. Then over the weekend and yesterday, we have that Wall Street Journal article, basically a hit piece of very similar tactics to the Russia collusion hoax, like a wrap-up smear type thing, a pap smear, a rap smear. I don't know. I used to have a phrase for that, but whatever. They launder a fake story, give it an air of credibility, saying like it's classified, so we don't even know what it is, but trust us, it's super bad. And even Congress can't see it because Tulsi Gabbard herself is the one not allowing them to see it. And they, don't even mention until like 15 paragraphs in that, oh yeah, the OIG did look into this and said there was, no credibility here. But that doesn't matter. They're doing their best to smear Tulsi Gabbard so that anything that comes out from Tulsi is therefore also smeared. That's the tactic here. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to matter. Things are so like divided on partisan lines right now. I sometimes don't know whether or not it matters at all what the truth is. One side is going to go one way with the story. The other side is going to go the other way. There's some people in the middle that maybe could be swayed one way or the other, but I don't think it's as large of a block as people think. They'll claim Trump fabricated the evidence. That's what, that's a good comment, Andy. That's what Fulton County is kind of already doing. I did say pap-up smear. Yep. That's what we're calling it now. But yeah, they're already saying, they're already freaking out. Like, we can't trust the FBI and their chain of custody. And then we're going to need a special counsel to look into this FBI investigation. And then we'll need a special counsel to look into that FBI investigation. It's all so stupid. Spetzel, the mainstream media has had to backtrack some on the COVID vaccines after X was purchased and voices were heard and the public became more aware. Suspect the same on election fraud. How much of that, though, was because of the truth? And like, have we seen a single media person be held accountable for any of the lies and propaganda they've spread going back to 2016? Because I don't think we have. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. Can a uniparty be divided? I'm not talking about the uniparty itself. I'm talking about the people. The uniparty is one party who pretends to be divided into two groups, red versus blue. But then us, the people, we're the ones that are actually divided over the fake division of the uniparty. Pap smear, women backing up, y'all know what that is. I know what it is too. That's why it's funny. Boring Tuesday, take a shot every time Patel Patriot says schmear. You guys can get real wasted if that's the case. Have I said it that much, though? Probably. Media is a snake in the grass. Quiet Coney, well, Obama did sign propaganda into law. It has to be made illegal again. Trumpet, John, you're pushing all the buttons today. What buttons am I pushing? Phil Scarborough, whatever the DOJ showed the judge to approve the raid is the real evidence Trump has. It must be pretty irrefutable. Yeah, we're also going to probably go through an old thread of mine from the Jack Smith stuff. I've talked about it a little bit on some recent shows. But Trump has way more than we even realize. And it's not just, in Fulton County. It's all over the place. I agree. Schmear is a funny word. I think it was Kevin Sorbo yesterday online. He was like, why do the Democrats lie so much? Why do these people think it's only Democrats who lie? And why do these people continually buy into the controlled opposition dynamic that's going on? We the people are divided over the fake division of the uniparty, John. That is a brilliant way of putting it. Well, thank you, Matt Trump. Good to see you, man. John needs a shirt that says confirmation bias. I think it is one of his faves. Yeah. I'm a little biased, but I agree that is one of my faves. Okay, let's start going through this. I'm going to stop goofing off. To Chairman Warner, and she could have just said like a big old F you, Warner. That's all this was needed. But instead, she went into detail, which I appreciate. I've received your letter regarding my presence at the Federal Bureau of Investigation's execution of a search warrant on the office of the Clerk of the Court of Fulton County, Georgia on 28 January 2026. I did express last night that I do not like when people write dates that way with the day first, then the month. I think it's stupid, but doesn't matter. For a brief period of time, I accompanied FBI Director Bailey and Atlanta Acting Special Agent in Charge Pete Ellis in observing FBI personnel executing that search warrant issued by the United States District Court of the Northern District of Georgia pursuant to a probable cause finding. My presence was requested by the President and executed under my broad statutory authority to coordinate, integrate, and analyze intelligence related to election security, including counterintelligence, foreign and other malign influence in cybersecurity. The FBI's intelligence, counterintelligence divisions are one of the 18 elements that I oversee. Now, the funny thing about this whole letter is pretty much everything from the date here to the very end of this thing, where she says, moreover, the United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia issued the search warrant on the office of the Clerk of the Court of Fulton County under seal. I have not seen the warrant or evidence of the probable cause that the DOJ submitted for court approval. Therefore, the ODNI had no ability, authority, or responsibility to inform the committees about the search warrant ahead of its execution. That's all she needed to put in here. She didn't even need to do this at all. But the fact that she did, the only relevant part to the questions being asked of her are the very first intro sentence or two, and then the last couple. Everything else in between is just chock full of nuggets, and I don't think it was really for them. I think it was more so for us. Maybe that's wishful thinking. but it's damn interesting. In the 12 FBI field offices across the country, including the Atlanta field office, the senior FBI assistant director in charge or special agent in charge is dual-hatted as my domestic D&I representative. The domestic D&I rep program was established in 2011 through a memorandum of understanding between the ODNI and FBI. And you know what? I want to see that. 2011 MOU DNI FBI. I wonder if that's public. It's got to be. That's not it. Maybe that's it. No. Is it this? Director of National Intelligence Representatives. Yeah, this must be it. Huh. Okay, I have that up, so I'll read through this later, but I find that interesting. Okay, back to here. The domestic and DNI reps are distributed by region and focus on specific domestic issues of concern or interest, including threats to critical infrastructure. Now, one thing to point out, keep in mind, it was Jay Johnson, Obama's head of the DHS, who made election infrastructure critical infrastructure. They did it based on the fabricated ICA put forth by Brennan, stating that Russia interfered in the election. Like, the whole reason they made election infrastructure critical infrastructure was based on that ICA, and it was done as a way to further control the election system by the deep state. Like, they used it as a weapon, and I think Trump kind of flipped it on its head, like he does with most things. Like, he used it against them. But the original intent of that was for CISA to be the one assisting steal elections by further making policies and protections for it. It's always done under that guise. Like, we're going to make it better. We're going to make it more secure. So here's an entire government agency that's established. Just trust them, bro. They're good, though. They're not going to do anything nefarious. Promise. That's never the case. Anyway, I visited several DNI reps at FBI field offices across the country. While visiting the FBI field office in Atlanta, I thanked the FBI agents for their professionalism and great work and facilitated a brief phone call for the president to thank the agents personally for their work. I also think that's a little notable. Like, she let out here that Trump called the FBI and was like, hey, guys, good job. If you don't want it to look like it's political or that Trump has his hand in it, you probably don't want to let on that you connected a phone call between Trump and the people doing the raid. So I'm not sure why she included that in here. I'm not sure why the call took place at all. But here we are. It's interesting. He did not ask any questions, nor did he or I issue any directives. Richard wrote, John, your documents game is kind of rusty. What do you mean? I mean, I actually kind of agree. I'm a little rusty with the document. We haven't had good documents in a while, man. It's not my fault. A lot of people think Epstein is in WITSEC. You guys are hilarious. I'm not even going to engage with that. If you guys want to think he's in WITSEC, go for it. I just don't care enough to. Care. Frederick Weathers. I read that Jack Poso and the group is using the ICE app to make false sightings to deflect low IQers from rating their halftime show. If everyone is freaking out about Tulsi, why did they not bring up that she has never resigned from her military position? You would think that they would use it to remove her or something else in play. You know, I won't bring up Epstein anymore. I promise, Ramon. You can't hear me? Am I using the right mic? Hold up. Yeah, hold up. Is that a little better? It could be because I have a sinus infection. But also, my power has been doing something weird today. Like, twice so far, the power's just gone out and then come right back on immediately. I don't know if it's weather related or what it is, but everything in my office reset, my computers, my audio stuff. Okay, you guys hear me just fine. It sounds like it's It's a you problem. Fluster Cluck 99. John, I have no evidence he's not in WITSEC. Spetzel, did you hear that meeting matters? I don't know what I said, but you need to turn the volume from 0 to a number higher than 0. That is good good advice. Okay, back to this. ODNI's Office of General Counsel has found my actions to be consistent and well within my statutory authorities as the Director of National Intelligence. I address your questions as follows. Election security is a national security issue. Boom. Interference in the U.S. elections is a threat to our republic and a national security threat. The president and his administration are committed to safeguarding the integrity of U.S. elections to ensure that neither foreign nor domestic powers undermine the American people's right to determine who our elected leaders are. Towards that effort, the president tasked ODNI with taking all appropriate actions under my statutory authorities towards ensuring the integrity of our elections, and specifically directed my observance of the execution of the Fulton County search warrant. So going back to what I read at the end, let me read this. The United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia issued the search warrant on the office of the clerk of the court of Fulton County under seal. As such, I have not seen the warrant or the evidence of the probable cause that the DOJ submitted to the court for approval. Therefore, the ODNI had no ability, authority, or responsibility to inform the committees about the search warrant ahead of its execution. But they knew it was coming. So the story is that they were there. It had nothing to do with the search warrant. They haven't seen the evidence of it. They didn't know what was in there, what was submitted. But they knew the search warrant was going to be submitted and executed on that date. And it was on the president's authority that she was there. Like, so the president and everybody knew that the FBI was doing this, but they're claiming they didn't know what was in the search warrant. That's a little fishy of a story to me. I'm not buying that one. Not buying it. As I publicly highlighted on 10 April 2025, ODNI has been actively reviewing intelligence reporting and assessments on election integrity since I took office. As part of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center's NCSC responsibility to lead, manage, and coordinate counterintelligence matters related to election security, NCSC personnel traveled with me to Fulton County to support this effort. They were not present during the execution of the warrant. Then where were they? The Director of National Intelligence, this is number 2, Director of National Intelligence has broad authority to coordinate, integrate, and analyze intelligence related to election security. This is where it gets juicy. We get into some more of the authorities here. To preserve the integrity of our elections, we must understand whether there has been foreign or other malign interference in our elections, and whether vulnerabilities exist in our election infrastructure that could be exploited in future elections. If you guys remember, there's that clip of Tulsi saying that our machines are vulnerable. I think it was at one of those show and tell, cabinet show and tell things. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's this one.
I've got a long list of things that we're investigating. We have the best of the best going after this. Election integrity being one of them. We have evidence of how these electronic voting systems have been vulnerable to hackers for a very long time, and vulnerable to exploitation to manipulate the results of the votes being cast, which further drives forward your mandate to bring about paper ballots across the country so that voters can have faith in the integrity of our elections.
Says they're vulnerable. We've known this. We've always known this, and everybody knows this. This is not an actual bipartisan issue. It's really not. It's only an issue for people when their guy loses. But the issue is always maintained. People just don't talk about it. Like, if their guy wins, okay, yeah, our elections are fine. But this has always been there, and it's a problem that needs to be fixed. It's part of the Uniparty's like controlled oppo storyline too. You think about it. The Uniparty doesn't actually care who wins for the most part. There's probably a few people that sneak in, but that's the point of the Uniparty. They can put forth a candidate under a red label or a blue label, It doesn't matter which one gets in. At the end of the day, they'll play along with their party, and at the end of the day, they'll keep us all enslaved. And part of that is when their big guy loses, they get everybody distracted arguing about minor election fraud stuff. But the actual election fraud is pervasive, and it's no surprise it's never actually gotten anywhere. We've never actually gotten to the bottom in a public sense of how bad our elections really are. But anyway, back to this. Why does it keep resetting that? Okay. Section 102A of the National Security Act of 1947, as amended, provides the DNI with robust authority to coordinate and integrate national intelligence, which includes intelligence pertaining to foreign intelligence and counterintelligence threats to election processes and infrastructure. For example, election voting systems and software, voter registration databases. This includes direction for the DNI to have access to all national intelligence, consistent with other law, as well as authority to establish objectives, priorities, and guidance for the intelligence community to ensure timely and effective collection, processing, analysis, and dissemination of national intelligence. Now, the National Security Act of 1947 has always been an interesting one for me because if you go back to devolution, Part 13, Executive Order 13961 was issued using the authority of the National Security Act of 1947. It's fascinating. But Ash had pointed out in one of our chats that this is what gave this act is what gave birth to the military industrial complex. I'm just going to read what you said, Ash. I hope that's okay. U.S. power and currency being backed by military strength, branded as the full faith and credit of the people of the United States. I thought it was signal that they changed the name back. Tulsi citing their authorities for building it as the means for hopefully destroying it. Exceptional script writing. It's again one of those. It's the same concept Trump uses often. Like he's operating within their battle space. He does this on a narrative level. He does this on a semi-actual level. The only place I don't think he actually does it is outside of all that. But in terms of this, like he's using their own weapons against them constantly, their own authorities in the normie battle space. It's brilliant. But so that is notable. That National Security Act is what created the position of the DNI. And then goes on, Section 119C of the National Security Act as amended requires that the ODNI maintain a capability to analyze and integrate intelligence on foreign attempts to, I'm not sharing the screen, to influence U.S. policy or public opinion and to give assessments and warnings to policymakers and Congress. The next, Section 6508 of the NDAA of 2020, the timing on that is not lost on me either, by the way. That was while Trump was in office prior to the 2020 stolen election. It provides for the DNI to designate a national counterintelligence officer within the NCSC to lead, manage, and coordinate counterintelligence matters related to election security. This responsibility includes addressing risks posed by foreign powers to election infrastructure, such as voting systems and voter registration databases. NCSC's counterintelligence integration, coordination, and outreach responsibilities under the Counterintelligence Enhancement Act of 2002 and delegated authorities as the National Intelligence Manager for CI in accordance with Executive Order 12333 and Intelligence Community Directive 900 are leveraged to support these efforts. A lot of mumbo jumbo. And then this next paragraph is pretty baller, talking about Executive Order 13848. Through Executive Order 13848, imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in the United States election, first issued on 12 September of 2018, the president declared a national emergency on the threat of foreign interference in the United States election and directly tasked the DNI with assessing foreign interference after every federal election. That assessment must identify the nature of any foreign interference and any methods employed to execute it. And that's the big part. Because a lot of people, when they think foreign interference, and maybe not, but I feel like they think like, oh, machine manipulation. And I do think that exists. I really do. I don't know to what extent, though. But where she says here, foreign interference and any methods employed to execute it. That, to me, that's like a broader scope. She's like hinting at, yeah, it's more than just machine manipulation, which I do think happens. But it's bigger than that. Do you remember the story from earlier in the year when Kash Patel came out and was like, yeah, the Chinese, they had a bunch of like fake IDs made out and sent to the United States. They stopped at the border and we knew it was coming. I wonder, Kash Patel, Chinese fake IDs. And then it came out that it was Christopher Wray who ended up, come on. My internet's being stupid again. My browser. Here we go. I think this is it. I think it was Christopher Wray who stonewalled it. FBI Director Kash Patel said this week that the Bureau had shared alarming but unsubstantiated allegations about manipulation of the 2020 election with a Republican member of Congress. Let's see. The unsubstantiated claim promoted by Patel, which an unidentified confidential human source gave to the FBI in 2020, asserts that Chinese mass-produced driver's license to be used in a mail-in ballot scheme. Patel linked to an article written by John Solomon, whom Trump appointed alongside Patel in 2022 to represent him before the National Archives and Records Administration. I almost forgotten about that story. So that is notable. Anyway, back to this. That assessment must identify the nature, blah, blah, and the foreign government or governments that directed, sponsored, or supported it. That executive order also directed the heads of all federal agencies to provide any relevant information to the DNI to execute that direction. Now, one of the things I think she's looking into, and one of the things I think we've gotten a lot of evidence on over the last year, especially with Trump in office, and especially at the beginning when they were going through declassifying a whole bunch of old assessments and whatnot of how weaponized the intelligence community has become. How many valid, whatever that even means, like what intelligence did they have about interference in our election that they didn't even move up the food chain? Like we know that there are many elements that were and probably still are political that were weaponized against us. Somebody gets a lead and just doesn't even report it. How often did that happen? And we still don't even know what DNI Ratcliffe really knew. And I'm going to get to him in a minute. And this old Twitter thread that I did. But she's reviewing that stuff. I think we're going to get unearthed old intelligence reports and assessments talking about how like election fraud scenarios and things that were happening that didn't even see the light of day. That stuff is going to be very, very interesting. Anyway, President Biden extended this national emergency on 9 September 2022. President Trump did so again on August 29th of 2025, demonstrating a bipartisan commitment towards addressing this threat to the integrity of our elections. It is interesting she's made it bipartisan, but she didn't even go like all the way in. It's weird that she picked those years. Trump issued the executive order in September of 2018. He continued it in September of 2020 and 2021. And then the auto pen continued it 4 times. And then Trump just did it again now. Technically, the auto pen, the Democrats, Joe Biden, whatever narrative you want to go with, they extended it more than Trump did. 4-3. It's been extended a total of 7 times. She picks 2 of them, random dates. But maybe that doesn't mean anything. Pursuant to Presidential Policy Directive 4, issued by President Obama on 26 July 2016, ODNI is the lead federal agency for intelligence support for coordinating responses to any significant cyber incidents, which may include intelligence related to the cybersecurity of election systems. Now, kind of a side note here. That's the wrong NS or PPD. She said PPD 4. If you look at it, PPD 4 is the National Space Policy. And I think she meant PPD 41, which is the Cyber Incident Coordination. I mean, that's definitely what she meant. It's got the right date on it of 7/26/16. But when you look at that PPD, it doesn't say anything about election infrastructure in here. It talks about critical infrastructure, but at this time, election infrastructure was not yet deemed as critical infrastructure. That didn't happen until January of 2017. But I thought it was interesting. She mentioned it, had the wrong NS or PPD. These PPDs, by the way, it's the same thing as Trump's NSPMs, which I talk about fairly often. This was just Obama's version. Each president gets to name it whatever they want. But anyway, furthermore, pursuant to National Security Memorandum, that's Biden's version of an NSPM, an NSM, on critical infrastructure, security, and resilience, NSM 22, issued by President Biden on April 30th of 2024, or the AutoPen, I should say, ODNI is the lead agency for intelligence support to any significant cyber incident to critical U.S. infrastructure, to include election infrastructure. She's really hammering the cyber aspect of this. I love it. Finally, ODNI is the lead intelligence agency in the Joint Cyber Planning Office, which coordinates and oversees the nation's strategy to secure critical cyber infrastructure, including cyber infrastructure used for elections. Remember how they always say that our elections the machines aren't connected to the internet? I'm going to see what you guys are saying in the chat. John, is the government messing with your computer? Probably. Read the quoted part above. Ash, what are you talking about? Didn't I do that? Let me go back. Hold on. I don't know what you're talking about, Ash. Sorry. I'm going to keep going, though. The Q Awakening left a rumble rant, says the ODNI was created as a result so-called intelligence failure on 9/11. Like DHS and the Patriot Act must be discombobulated along with the CIA and all other intelligence agencies. Anybody that thought Biden was real needs help. Okay, sorry, off topic. So, sorry, Ash. Back to this. So, ODNI, number 3, ODNI will not irresponsibly share incomplete intelligence assessments concerning foreign or other malign interference in U.S. elections. As I publicly stated on April 10th of 2025, there is information and intelligence reporting suggesting that electronic voting systems being used in the United States have long been vulnerable, not sharing my screen more, there we go, to exploitation that could result in enabling determined actors to manipulate the results of the votes being cast with the intent of changing the outcome of an election. ODNI and the IC continue to collect and assess all available intelligence concerning this threat to ensure the security and integrity of those elections. I love this, because they're not saying that, yeah, we found fraud or there is fraud. She's like listing all of the authorities she has, many of them having to do with cyber related. She's talking about machines, and she's like, as I told you guys, our machines have long been vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. And I'm just doing my job. We're assessing everything, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. But the interesting aspect of this raid in Fulton County, they didn't go after the machines. They got the ballots and tabular tapes and all the other physical stuff. They didn't get the machines. So it's weird that she's talking so much about that in this, having to do with her presence at the Fulton County raid when they didn't even get the machines at the raid. Does that make sense? Anyway, searching through intelligence holdings and conducting assessments with analytic rigor and excellence is an arduous and often time-consuming process. However, that process ensures that the IC's finished intelligence products are objective, independent of political considerations, and based on all available sources. I will share our intelligence assessments with Congress once they are complete. And it's always funny to me that they're complaining about her not even sharing the stuff with them, because if they're right about there being foreign interference in our elections, guess what, Congress? You guys were elected via that same fraudulent system. You guys are beneficiaries of that. Why would she share what she's doing with people who benefited from the act she's looking into? Makes no sense. I mean, it makes sense, perfect sense to us of why she wouldn't share it, but them complaining about it is silly. Then finally here, Section 501A2 of the National Security Act of 1947, as amended, specifically highlights that the congressional accountability requirements of that act do not require that the president obtain approval from the congressional intelligence committees before initiating a significant intelligence activity. I feel like that's almost like a technicality she's using here. Like technically, yeah, okay. But it sounds like this has been long initiated. You know what I mean? Like it's been going on for a while. But regardless, more over the United States District Court, and this is the part I've read like 4 times. She had nothing to do with the warrant. She didn't know, allegedly. If you have any questions, you may contact Sarah Lynn Culley, Assistant Director of National Intelligence for Legislative Affairs. Signed with a middle finger. Okay, I want to, man, it's already 12:52. What the heck? Cruise through this. I want to go through this whole thread of mine. And I have so many tabs and news stuff. Are you guys cool with me just like focusing on the election stuff for this show? Get back to newsy things tomorrow, maybe. Phil Scarborough, after 2020, I got involved in my state's GOP, and they would rather shit their pants than talk about election fraud or the voting machines. I think they all know they're used to cheat. It's bizarre. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, guys. I'm gonna go through this old thread, and we'll do news stuff tomorrow because I found this fascinating. Going back through it again. This is from November of 2023. It's a thread on Trump's motion to compel discovery for his January 6th case. Jack Smith, being a real asshat, led to this motion to compel, and it's a fascinating read. This whole thing. I'm going to go back through the actual motion again later. I'm just going to read through the thread, see if I can find any more nuggets. But it's a 325 pages long. This is the focus here. So the central focus here is the 2020 election. Jack Smith is trying to paint a picture that Trump was knowingly spreading the big lie that the election was stolen. Trump is contending that there exists evidence proving the opposite. And this is the intro here. President Donald J. Trump respectfully submits this motion and the accompanying classified supplement seeking to compel the special counsel's office to provide the information and evidence discussed herein, which is subject to the office's obligations under Brady. The indictment in this case reflects little more than partisan advocacy designed to sabotage President Trump's leading campaign for the 2024 presidential election. Consistent with that improper and unlawful goal, the special counsel's office has chosen to rely on the views of witnesses who aligned with the Biden administration's political viewpoints and to treat those biased opinions as objective and irrefutable truths regarding the integrity of the 2020 election and the events of January 6, 2021. The problem with that approach is that President Trump and others, indeed hundreds of millions of voters, are not obligated to accept at face value the office's politically motivated narrative. It was not unreasonable at that time, and certainly not criminal, for President Trump to disagree with officials now favored by the prosecution and to rely instead on the independent judgment that the American people elected him to use while leading the country. And again, this is so important because it really, the crux of this whole thing is Trump was doing his duty as commander-in-chief, and this is something I've said repeatedly since the election was stolen. It was his duty as commander-in-chief to ensure that election wouldn't be stolen, if it was, to do something about it. And yet he walked away, and ever since walking away, I believe he implemented devolution, but ever since doing that, he hasn't stopped talking about the election fraud. He keeps saying it happened. It was there. He's seen evidence. He has evidence, all these things. If that's true, then he was derelict in his duty as president the first time around. Unless there's a missing, there's something missing there to explain it, which I think that something missing is obviously devolution. But anyway, I find this whole thing fascinating. Let's keep going. It hammers the Trump's motion hammers the SEO for ignoring political bias from the IC and not turning over Brady material that Trump knows that they have. Things like evidence of cyber attacks, both actual and attempted. For purpose of this motion, we accept the prosecution's contention that whether President Trump genuinely believed that the election was stolen is a matter for trial. Going down, the office cannot blame President Trump for public discord and distrust of the 2020 election results while refusing to turn over evidence that foreign actors stoked the very same flames that the office identifies as inculpatory in the indictment, as well as cyber attacks and other interference, both actual and attempted, that targeted critical infrastructure and election facilities before, during, and after the 2020 election. I think the main one that we know about and have heard about is the what was it called? I think it's in here. Why can't I think of it now? What was the cyber attack, guys? SolarWinds. The SolarWinds attack. That's the only one we've heard about, but they're talking about multiple ones having to do with the machines, cyber attacks. It's fascinating. This is where we get into the relevant facts, which basically goes in chronological order, starting with foreign interference, starting with foreign influence relating to the 2016 election. It references Exhibit A, which is a public version of the IC's assessment regarding foreign interference in the 2016 election. This is interesting because we now have the classified. It's been declassified. That was one of the things that came out from Ratcliffe, I believe, and D&I Gabbard. A public version of the 2016 ICA states that it is a declassified version of a highly classified assessment, which does not include the full supporting information, including specific intelligence on key elements of the influence campaign. Exhibit A at I, noting that the conclusions in the declassified and classified versions are identical. That's declassified now, which makes that more interesting. The 2016 ICA essentially concluded that Putin ordered a campaign to influence the 2016 election in Trump's favor. I don't trust the 2016 ICA, just like I don't trust the 2021. Both were politically motivated. However, the 2016 assessment was the basis for Trump's Executive Order 13848. That is all true. EO 13848 is described next. As I've said before, EO 13848 isn't some magical EO that itself proves Trump did anything. It shows that Trump was taking foreign interference seriously and broadly defined what it is to be considered foreign interference. That's what they even say in the thing. It orders those assessments, which ironically are then weaponized by the intelligence community, or have been traditionally, to frame the election theft narrative in a way that's favorable to the Uniparty. Arguably the most important arguably the most important part of the EO is it requiring the intelligence community to conduct an assessment regarding foreign influence interference efforts surrounding our elections. And then the EO requires a report to be prepared on that IC assessment. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But that's, you guys should be aware of this by now. I've covered this so many times. The most interesting part of that section C, the CISA statement, is that Trump's motion states that CISA's statement claiming there was no evidence any voting system had been compromised was false. This means Trump is claiming that there is evidence that contradicts this statement. And here's that from this motion. Less than 2 weeks after the 2020 election, CISA joined a public statement regarding election security. It's the famous one now. The 2020 election CISA statement claimed falsely that there was no evidence any voting system had been compromised and declared the 2020 election the most secure in American history. Just like Joe Scarborough said. And this is what D&I Gabbard is looking into. What evidence does Trump have or know of to state that, yeah, that's false? You guys saying that there was no evidence of any voting system having been compromised, that's a false statement. Continued. Right after claiming CISA's statement was false, the motion goes right into Section D, the SolarWinds sunburst attack. This is a big one. I talked about this in my series. One of the worst cybersecurity incidents in history. The threat actors inserted malicious code into 3 software builds for SolarWinds Orion products. If you guys remember, Dominion voting systems used SolarWinds. Later on in Trump's filing motion, he even mentions Dominion voting as part of the information he is seeking from the SCO. Information relating to abuses of equipment from Dominion voting systems. What does Trump know? Trump's argument with this is to refute CISA's that the 2020 was the most secure in American history. OJ has much more evidence than this. He definitely does. Malicious code provided the threat actors a backdoor into the network environments of SolarWinds customers. Dominion was one of those customers. There's this meeting with a reference to Ratcliffe. This is one of the more interesting things, considering Ratcliffe was at the time of the 2020 election in Tulsi Gabbard's position right now, the DNI. Now he's at CIA, but then he was DNI, and this is what he said. The classified briefing to co-conspirator 4, who's Jeff Clark, by the Director of National Intelligence. In late 2020 and early 2021, there were disagreements within the intelligence community regarding the scope and content of the 2020 election ICA. And this is where I was saying it's like political. Like all these people, the weaponized political people at the intelligence community, they come out and say one thing. And then D&I Ratcliffe at the time was like, no, I disagree with you guys. We'll get into that. But during that process on January 1st, 2021, the acting attorney general asked the DNI to provide a classified briefing to the individual referred to in the indictment as co-conspirator 4. On the same day, the DNI's chief of staff made a classified draft of the 2020 election ICA available to co-conspirator 4 so that co-conspirator 4 could review the document and speak to the DNI the following day. On January 2nd, 2021, the DNI used secure facilities to provide a classified briefing to co-conspirator 4 via telephone. The indictment alleges that on the day after that briefing, co-conspirator 4, Jeff Clark, transmitted an edited version of his draft letter, which included a change from its previous claim that the Justice Department had concerns to a stronger assertion that, as of today, there is evidence of significant irregularities that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states. He met with John Ratcliffe, the then DNI, and he changed his assessment from there's concerns to there is evidence of significant irregularities that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states. And now DNI Tulsi Gabbard is in that position and has access to the same intelligence that John Ratcliffe had that he would have given to Jeff Clark to make that statement. What the hell was it? I bet we'll find out. Let's keep going. Ratcliffe, central figure. We've talked about this. When he went to the game, the Army-Navy game with Trump on December 12th, it was the very next day Trump came out and said the election's under protest. Another thing I wrote about that is mentioned in this motion is Ratcliffe's views on the ICA. You guys should be familiar with this by now. They delayed the original ICA assessment from the intelligence community that was required by Executive Order 13848. It was due on like December 25th or something, well before the January 6th Electoral College vote, but they couldn't agree. And like there was reporting, actually, I think it was December 18th now that I think about it. November 3rd, 45 days, December 18th. Yeah. There's disagreement. And so they delayed it. They didn't put it out until January 7th, the day after the Electoral College vote, conveniently. And the intelligence community, the IC, they basically agreed that, yeah, there wasn't really much here. It was safe and secure. There might have been some attempts from like Russia and China. They were just mostly trying to help Trump or draw confusion, whatever. But Ratcliffe is the one who's like, no. There was one guy, the NIO from Cyber, that's a big one, Cyber again, who was like, yeah, I have the minority view. I don't think that this was the most secure election in American history. And DNI Ratcliffe agreed with him. And this is from Trump's motion. The unclassified version of the 2020 election ICA contains a minority view attributed to the National Intelligence Officer for Cyber, indicating some of Beijing's influence efforts were intended to at least indirectly affect U.S. candidates' political process and voter preferences. I don't think we've gotten this ICA declassified yet. I'd love to read it. And that's where I had to take a break. And then I don't think I ever picked back up on it. But I should go back through. I'm going to go back through. But yeah, guys, I'm just fascinated by any of this election stuff. And I think we're going to be getting more stories about what really happened in 2020. Like they're going to start trickling out. Pretty hot and heavy, I'd say. But anyway, guys, that is all I got. And there's no other rants. I still got to do a soft disclosure ad. Anything else in the chat from you guys? What if the secret of U.S. Space Force unmanned aircraft that landed on November 13th, 2023, after almost 2.5 years in orbit, was collecting election and other data and sending it back to President Trump? Yeah, some of that stuff, it's like fascinating to think about. Like, oh my gosh, it's possible. It could be. Wonder if we'll get proof of it. I don't know. I don't know. Can I post the link to this in the chat? Yes, I can. There is that thread for you guys to go through it yourself if you'd like. I'm digging back into more election stuff as this stuff trickles out and going back through some of my older stuff. So we'll be talking about this more and more as we go. Lee Walden, John, I, for one, am delighted you're back at what you love to do. Dig, don't give up. You 8 are a steely-eyed missile man. Thanks, man. Yeah, I need more documents, guys. We need to ask them to release more documents. Need them. Otherwise, it gets boring out here. Anyway, I'm going to send you over to Ghost. I went over a little bit. We'll do more newsy things tomorrow. So you guys have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. And yeah, with that, get yourself some soft disclosure. Valentine's Day is coming up. Peace, everybody.
The following ad is rated M for mature. Soft Disclosure wants you to get naked this Valentine's Day with limited edition his and her bundles that save you 20% off the individual retail prices. Proprietary oil infusions, grass-finished beef tallow, goat's milk from American goats, locally grown herbs and ingredients. Soft Disclosure is putting America First fruits on your skin.
And for these sexy bundles, we've added an all-new boar's haired beard brush and a solid jade gua sha. And the reason I'm here is because Alpha doesn't know how to say these words.
Gusha. His, hers. We need a moment to calm down. Don't hide your skin. Disclose it. Get naked this Valentine's Day with Soft Disclosure. Head over to softdisclosure.com and save 20% off individual retail prices with our his and hers customizable bundles and use promo code NAKED to save 15% off the rest of the site. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. Promo code does not apply to bundle discounts.
Let's get started.
That's what she said.
Oh, that's real good.
Why they stopping me? Stopping me.